Well, let's actually just back up a bit because both Rawls and Nozick are operating within a conception. They're assuming that there's going to be a state and trying to think about what the ideal form of political organisation would be vis-a-vis the relationship between individuals and that state.
That's right.
So let's back up a bit and think about this very concept of a state, which is, of course, a core concept in political philosophy. Where does the concept of the modern state come from? And what is the broader context in which we should view these different approaches in political philosophy?
So the modern state, I think, is, people often say it actually emerges from the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648 that ends the 30 Years' War, that it's really a historical
modern
phenomenon. But the modern conception of the state, if you like, seems to emerge bit by bit, actually, over a long period. And one sort of fundamental way of thinking about it emerges in the work of Thomas Hobbes, for example, early in the 17th century, the first half fundamentally of the 17th century, though his big book, Leviathan, wasn't published till 1651. And then a tradition which follows on that. And this tradition is often thought of as the tradition of a state of nature. So the thought would be any sort of social structure needs to be explained or maybe even justified, right? So we start off by supposing there is no such social structure. And now we ask, how would could such a social structure emerge consonant with principles that we think are acceptable principles? They might be principles of morality, for example. Hobbes's thought was that in the state of nature, things would be very bad indeed. His famous phrase, life would be nasty, brutish, and short. And so that any kind of society that one could generate would be better than that, and that rational people would try to band together to create such a society. He thought that such a society would have to give absolute power and absolute authority to some, well, in the best case for him, individual or group, and that would be then the state, right? Others have thought, well, the state of nature need not be quite so nasty, brutish, and short. The state need not be so autocratic. But nonetheless, that the thought would be that what justifies the state, what a state is something that claims to have authority in a given area or over a given population, and has the power actually to exercise that authority, both being thought of typically as conditions. And the thought would be such a state needs a justification. It gets a justification because rational agents would agree to give to some body or bodies such authority and such power as a condition for getting out of the state of nature that they'd be in otherwise. So that's the conceptual thought, I think, that lies behind a good deal of modern thinking about the state. Now, there's an alternative picture, which Marx and others have wanted to propose, which is that the state just emerges as not out of any sort of contract. It doesn't have a justification. It emerges simply as a mechanism that enables people to exploit each other and to actually, if it has a justification at all, the justification is that one can produce greater a greater economy by having it than by not having it.